We are back with another reading blog. We are jumping into one of the funniest comics you can pick up. Let's talk about it today.
I'm ready.
Welcome to the CodeX Cantina, where I am Una.
And I am Lezlie.
Today, Lezlie and I have a special adventure jumping into Chew by John Layman and Rob Guillory, coming from Image Comics today.
I did not realize when I mentioned this one that it was also from Image Comics.
This is something that is just so absurd and so ridiculous. You can't help but laugh at it because they just go off the rails and they take swipes at almost every genre. They're making references to other comics, other books.
So I'm going to need your help on this one since it's poking fun at other comics and whatnot. Since I'm very limited and maybe some of our folks watching are as well, you're going to have to probably point those out to me so I don't miss them.
Oh, you'll be too busy laughing because the artist, Rob Guillory, just goes to town where in tons of panels, just in the background, there's just funny little jokes. You can spend time just plowing through the story or sit down and just absorb, each one of these 60 issues worth of comics panels that Rob put out there, that you're going to have a blast regardless of whether you pick up on it at all or not.
That's fantastic. And I will admit to you, this one ended up on my radar because somebody told me that I liked Animal Companions so much. There was one in this that was the whole reason that I should pick it up.
Have you ever read a food-focused comic before?
I never have.
There's something that this industry has done, particularly like we've done some manga on this channel before. There's a very famous one called Food Wars. And what happens is they'll bite into this food and all of a sudden their clothes get ripped off and they're in this like spa with a bear and it's just so relaxing and it's ridiculous. But it's playing up the sensuality and very intimate moment that we have, I think, sometimes when eating food.
I'm excited because there's some stuff that Chris makes that's so good I could literally take a bath in it.
And if there is a hell, we found it, because in this comic, the whole premise of this, is that chicken is illegal.
What?
To buy, to consume, everything.
No.
So what happens is...
Chicken is my favorite food!
The FDA has become the most powerful organization in the world, much like in Demolition Man, when Taco Bell's like the fanciest restaurant in the world. And there's this cover-up schema. You have crooked cops. You've got good cops. And here's the best thing. You're going to have food superpowers where when you eat certain things, it can unlock powers in you or activates your powers to learn things that you wouldn't normally have access to potentially and stuff. It is an absolute trip what food allows and what drives people to do in this universe.
So I'm trying to put all of this together and figure out what could possibly be going on. You call it true crime, so I'm guessing the true crime has to do with people obtaining illegal chickens or raising chickens illegal. I cannot wait to find out. Chicken is my favorite food. I mean, I'm from the South. Fry it, grill it, barbecue it. I'm going to eat it any way you give it to me.
Let's move into looking at the covers. Let's look at cover number 2, which I think is going to get you a little bit closer to what the series is headed towards.
So do we have some mobster here? Is he a mobster? Is he like the chicken mafia boss?
Oh, I can't tell you that. You'll find out. It's just soon enough in issue number 2. All right, issue number 5.
See, I'm having flashbacks to Nailbiter right now. It looks like an ear. Is that an ear?
Oh, this series. Okay, let's look at, and finally, to kind of bring in some more of the comic element to it, I think he really found his stride here. Let's look at issue number 6 cover.
What is that? That's like a pineapple with octopus legs. I'm a little disturbed, and it looks like they are too.
But you can see kind of the cop badges. You can see how it's very adversarial, almost in every single issue, and cover at least. And then also in each issue, it's really interesting the way John Layman paces this. And it's kind of one of those comics where a ton happens in each issue. So it might take you longer to get through, but it's just, you're having so much fun through the whole thing. I can't wait to experience this with you.
I'm excited. I'm ready to dive into the first issue right now.
All right, guys, we are going to be doing this 20 issues at a time. So we are going to jump into issues 1 through 20 talks next, then 21 through 40, and then finally wrap it up with the last 20 issues of the series. Let's talk Chew. We are back in hell, a land with no chicken, with Chew issues 1 through 20. Fundamentally flawed, if you ask me, because the fake form of chicken is just with a Y. CHICKYN, which would just be pronounced chicken as well.
Well, it may be a little bit more of a chicken. I mean, I think I would rather have that than the poult-free.
We are thrust into a world where there was an outbreak of avian flu. People died, and the FDA became the most powerful organization in the world, banning chicken from purchase and usage. The world of Chew, where we have a police procedural following around Tony Chew. And boy, is this world packed with interesting characters.
So, I love Poyo. Is that how you say his name?
That's how I'd say his name.
Okay, I love Poyo. I'm not getting enough Poyo in my life. But I do like Tony, but I also I think his name is pronounced Valenzano.
Well, I like Valenzano, or however you pronounce it, because he kind of reminds me of like the Samuel L. Jackson character from Pulp Fiction, right?
Yes.
Walking around in the suit, all business.
Yes.
And then Poyo, who doesn't love Poyo with his demonic, issue 18. We got to talk about issue 18. When they're flying in, people are getting blown up left and right, and they have to unleash the ultimate weapon. And who is the ultimate weapon?
But you don't know that. You think it's a bomb. And I absolutely loved that scene where he was just let loose. But is that the one we also get his backstory of how he trained with the monks? And they're all like, hi-ya, and he's over there, Bakar!
And then Layman is just like, yeah, I'm just kidding. None of that crap was true. Yeah. And it's just every panel when Guillory and Layman decide this is going to be a striking panel, every single panel for that Poyo, what's the most important shot to show? They nail it where you're just like, whoa! And every single shot matters and tells this really gruesome and graphic story. But it's so ridiculous that a chicken's doing it. You're also laughing and you're like, wow, this is some black comedy.
Well, and at this point, I started delving deeper into who all was behind this comic. And from what I understand, it's just these two guys. John does the writing and the lettering, and Rob does the drawing and the coloring. And I was just floored that ththese two guys put this together. I loved it. I love all of the Easter eggs that Rob puts in. I'm not just reading the story and looking at the art. I'm looking behind all of that. There are so many things, so many funny things that were from the times. There's one scene where there's a computer on the desktop and there's a spider web on the side that says, "Leave Brittany alone." In the diner where, is it Chew and D-Bear? They're in the diner and it has the photos of Mel Gibson and Donnie Glover from Lethal Weapon in the background. And
the mixture of real art from our world finding its way in there. Even in issue 2, they had the Bloodsport Chong Li screaming with Bruce Lee in the middle of this very Tarantino-esque battle. It is so engaging. It's art,
perfect.
Every step of the way through this comic that you can easily see how it could be like myself's favorite comic.
Oh yeah, there's so many nods to pop culture. There's another one where it's the issue where Tony and Amelia go on their first date, and there's a sticky note in the background that says rule number 1 of Food Club. It's just there. And then there's a scene where is it Russia, where Tony's going to investigate and he encounters what everyone thinks is a vampire, but it's another, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Sibopath, where there's a Han Solo cast in the side of the room. I don't know if you noticed that.
Oh, I missed that. Now I got to go back and look that up.
So Una and I, buddy, read comic and manga together all the time, and we just constantly keep a conversation going. But we try not to share our thoughts about this comic together as we're reading, so we can save it to experience it the first time with you. But it's so hard not to immediately just pick up the phone and send him all of my thoughts, tons of pictures that I'm snapping that I'm finding, enjoying through this comic. It is the hardest thing in my life. I promise you that.
Now, another one that I really like is we got to talk about the covers, because covers are important to comics a lot of times because that's what causes people to pick it up and look at it, right? So you had the Reservoir Chogs, the cover that's a reference to Pulp Fiction with them standing there in the suits and then the guns. You had almost like a Last Supper kind of like 3-panel spread where you had to buy that issue like 3 different times to get all of the different ones. Or if you have the Smorgasbord or Omnivore editions, you can actually get all of the variant covers in one collection. That's really cool. I love just how they're not afraid to, one, just use tons of stereotypes, use stereotyped roles, but then break those and also just make fun of so many different elements of our pop culture. There's really a way for you to find your way into this comic in a lot of different avenues.
I mean, it's just very clever marketing. Even if I didn't know anything about this comic, if I had walked by and seen the Pulp Fiction cover in a store, I would have immediately picked it up. I love Pulp Fiction. I love that movie. So yeah, they were definitely clever with their marketing.
All right, Lezlie, favorite moment of this comic so far? Go.
Favorite is the Poyo beatdown. Hands down. Second favorite is going to be Tony and Amelia's first date, because I just love how that played out, and you weren't really sure how she was going to react, and then she's just kind of like, yeah, what's up?
Well, I love the way, actually, if you remember, when Tony first meets her, he's like this procedural, by-the-book guy. He never lets his emotions take over, as opposed to John Colby, right, who always does what he wants, like the romantic. And then when he sees Amelia reading about this food that causes all the egg terrorists to just barf, and you have that scene of him in love with all the barf coming on him, is paralleled when they go on their first date and Amelia is standing there and she has all the blood splattered on her from Tony shooting that guy from the other angle. They both just have this disgusting fluid thrown all over them that I found it hysterical.
So first of all, I love the clever, this comic is so weird, but so clever at the same time with the different food superpowers, I guess, is the way to describe it. And just how they're so different and unique, but then they go together. Like Amelia can describe food in such a way that the reader can actually taste it. Tony cannot eat things without basically tracing it all the way back to where it came from and all the horribleness it might have encountered on the way. So he can only eat beets. So he can't, I'm a food lover, and Tony can't experience food the way that everybody else can, but through Amelia's writing, he can. And I just love that. I love how clever they were to come up with those types of unique abilities and then have them meet each other.
He's just such an incredibly creative writer. One of my favorite scenes from this comic was when he was in jail with the Hinano brothers and he reports that he knows where they buried a body. And they're like, how did you figure that out? And he had just had his head dunked in the toilet.
The swirly.
And the toilet. And it's like the next panel, like, nah, that's not what happened. But I was cracking up so hard at those types of
facial expression. When they asked that and he's like turned and looking back at the toilet and his lower lips like poked out, the facial expression was just nailed. Absolutely nailed. I loved it.
Willikers, Lezlie, I can't believe we haven't talked about Tony Chu yet, his sister, Antonelle Chu, who is like the most darling character in this entire series.
I don't really care for her. I don't like... Yep. Yeah. Sorry. I like Olive more than I like her. I find Olive more interesting. But Tony, the twin, she hides who she is. She's letting Tony get called a freak and disrespected, looked down upon, and yet he still does his job. He still uses his unique ability to eat the nastiest things that can be found. He still does it because he wants to solve these cases. And she's over here hiding who she is, letting Tony take all the freak titles. I'm not down with that.
Well, we have inappropriate comedy, we have ridiculous scenes, overpowered government agencies. Let's find out what happens next with issues 21 through 40. It's like a personal spear in my heart because the Applebee's that was by my old house shut down. Did I ever tell you this story? Do you know what they replaced the Applebee's with?
Something better, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, it was a chicken joint. All they do is serve chicken.
Applebee, the character in this comic series, is kind of nasty. He's gross, right? Would you agree?
Okay, I know where you're going with this one. All right, you guys just don't understand Applebee's on the level that I do.
It's
okay?
gross. It's gross. Applebee's is disgusting. It was a horrible chain. Horrible.
First of all, you misunderstand Applebee's in the same way that you misunderstood Tony. Now you see how hard I had to keep my mouth shut when you were talking about how he had the same powers as Tony with a Y chew. I was like, Now you see why she had to have him bite the dead body at NASA, because her powers don't work and they are clairvoyancy, sebovoyancy, instead of the sebopathy that we see.
I know she's your girlfriend, and I'm sure you are excited because we got another issue with her, which was clever. I admit I like the idea of what they did with the story with her, but mostly it was because I was like, I got to the family recipes volume.
Mm-hmm.
And she made an appearance. I'm like, oh, I know Una's excited. His little girlfriend's back.
Well, this has been a cool set of issues because we're learning about other people. It's not just Tony Chu that we follow around. We get to follow John. We get to follow Olive. We get to follow even Applebee. Remember we flash forward to issue 60 where they're like old men and like, I still hate you. We explore a lot more of the universe. The universe exploded in these 20 issues, including going into this other planet on this psychedelic trip or not.
I love the psychedelic chogs. Forget the frogs. Take me to the chogs.
Chogs is where it's at.
As far as expanding the world here, my favorite was when Poyo went to hell and kicked ass and took names. All that was missing was the bubble gum.
Well, and not only that, Satan looked like Applebee too. So that concludes Applebee's is hell, according to John Layman.
Yeah. Well, and then just mentioning Applebee's, and Applebee, rather, that takes me into a trope I usually hate is love triangles. I freaking hate love triangles. They're so stupid and but in this one with Kobe and Applebee and is it Pena? Is that? Oh my gosh. That was such a clever way how they did that. They're like, oh, come on guys. You knew this was happening when the three of them ended up in bed together, but they were like, you flip the page and it's like, bet you didn't see this coming. And then you flip the page, or this. And I just got so tickled. I thought that was hilarious. Which, I have to interrupt myself. So, Kobe, Applebee, have you noticed how clever they are with naming their characters after food?
Mm-hmm. And even pollo is literally the phonetic word for chicken in Spanish, right?
Caesar salad. And then we have Herschel Brown, who I really liked him because he could make weapons out of chocolate. Which leads me to my next favorite thing. Olive, if she interacts with someone and I think Tony was doing it too. They eat somebody, they can absorb their power. Like she was making little ninja chocolate darts. I'm like, ooh, I like this.
Those are the people you want to piss off the least when you're eating dinner with them, right?
Right. It was so gross when Dan Franks, Amelia's ex-boyfriend, when he kidnapped Tony and he was wanting to write this Major League Baseball player sex story book and he has dug up all these players and he's feeding them. Oh, so gross.
But deep down inside, aren't you also kind of just like, that's a great idea about the sex life of these superstars? And what a creative way to to have their powers be used in that. And it just keeps on going, right? Because then there's 2 more issues where his baseball skills are used in a really hilarious way to solve the cases. Yeah. And you see, Olive is now carving the chocolate and she uses those chocolate weapons and stuff. It's really cool the way that these powers kind of become very fun, interesting plot devices for how they solve these cases. My
favorite is when they have the crates and they think it's Poyo, and it opens up and it's just a stack of baseballs.
Yeah. And then also when they're tripping and they end up in that warehouse and they're like, oh no, we went to the pillow warehouse instead, but oh my gosh, there's 800,000 chickens below.
Yeah.
It's a comic that just constantly subverts your expectations, and it's really fun.
It's so clever. And just everything is enjoyable about it. I have just as much fun looking for the clues in the background as I do the actual story itself.
All right, so what's going to happen next? What is going on with outer space, this Gulsaberry, and the chicken flu? Are they related or not? And is this government cover-up a real thing, or was there really a flu and a cause behind it?
So I think it was faked. I don't even know that it was bird flu. I bet it was something that was faked. But why? What is the reasoning behind it? I mean, the obvious bad guy is this other Cybopath that Tony has declared war on, which that's awesome. I love Tony's character development was so freaking cool in this batch of issues. Like, he is a badass now. I am so in for it. I mean, it just stands to reason that guy's behind everything, right?
It does, but what's that have to do with outer space and even this, pseudo-religion popping up where chicken is doom?
I think the Immaculate Ova is a red herring. I think that's a distraction.
Okay, well,
or is it going to give birth to something else? That's so bad.
What comes first, the chicken or the ova, right? Well, all right, guys, let's jump into issues 41 through 60 and wrap this series up. Shot to the heart, and it's too late. Poyo is dead in these issues.
I absolutely did not see that coming, although it did make perfect sense once I calmed down about it. I wasn't happy. As you know, he's my favorite character, and I just wasn't getting enough of him. And then they killed him.
There's how many times they say, this enemy has all of these forces and mystic powers, but Poyo is just badass. Like, that's just the trump card, right? So now Tony needs that. But at least we got some of like the in hell scenes where we know that we can at least experience Poyo in another universe.
As the Lord of Hell. I did enjoy those scenes very much, as well as Tony once he had consumed Poyo and got his powers. I guess that was the fast track. It wasn't like they had time for them to bring Mr. Miyagi in to train him and have a training montage.
There was no sweeping of the leg, but speaking of being in hell, we also have the marriages, where the entire Appleby family looks like Appleby.
When they flip to the scene and they're like, oh, by the way, this happened in Vegas, and it's Tony and Amelia in bed and they're in the honeymoon suite and they got married. I was excited. I was like, yes! And then a few pages later, they flip the page and it's like, oh, and we're in another honeymoon suite and it's Kobe and Appleby.
It's the good reunions before the big fight, which I have to admit, it came so early. Right, this big showdown with the failed collector takedown in issue 50. I was
Huge
just kind
mistake.
of like, what? We still have 10 more issues of this series. Why is this happening already?
And I think that was a huge mistake on John Layman's behalf because, in my opinion, from volume 10 through 12, there was a whole lot of what I call wasted space. Whole lot of empty panes where there's just artwork illustrating emotions of characters, but a lot of it just wasn't needed to move the story forward. And I don't know if they just had said, we're going to have 60 issues of this comic, or how that worked, and they just stretched it to make it work. But I just thought it was a lot of wasted space. That's my humble opinion.
Well, they said earlier that it was going to be issue 60 was the ending. So was he stretching out space?
That's true.
Or was this letting characters kind of do their final moments of grieving? I don't know, but I would say I had a similar feeling where it didn't totally work for me. And even that very last issue, I'm like, why are we spending the last issue doing these stupid one-off things to occupy our minds? Like, I get the idea of distracting the hero away from the final grief that's happening. But to me, you know, you head towards this climax, which I think for a lot of viewers, the climax was the collector, right?
Yes, absolutely.
The chicken story was the backstory, and I get it, how it's causing grief.
It was so stupid. The collector was definitely the grand finale. The chicken ending, that was so cheesy.
I think Layman wanted the chicken to be the main antagonist, but I just didn't feel that way. Even when we went back in time, it didn't feel like they were trying to cause all this pain, even though they did, particularly from Chu's perspective, Tony Chu. And I get, I have a quote here from John Layman himself about that. In Layman's goodbye letter to the series and its fans, he states that this was always going to be the ending. It's a great image and allows for one final catharsis. Tony strikes back at the beings who murdered so many humans in their first strike, held the earth to ransom, and compelled him to commit mass murder. And I think while that makes sense, I don't know if I totally agree that this was real catharsis and a good climactic ending. Maybe that's the curse of American comics, but we had no falling action. We had no resolution at the end. I imagine a lot of people out there will say this felt incomplete, and that would be my feedback, was this, it wasn't a good climactic ending because there was so little resolution at the end for me.
Well, he did not make that storyline the forefront. That was not the main thread of these comics at all. It was the collector. So while he may say that was always it, he, in my opinion, failed to make it come across to us that way. That just felt like a very tiny plot line just for comedic reference, actually. I never took that seriously. I never thought we were actually going to even address that in these comics. I thought that was just going to always be did someone cause it? Or did it really just happen organically? I thought that was just going to be one of those questions that was just going to be in the void. Something left for the readers to just wonder indefinitely about.
So now you can see my challenge when it comes to recommending this to people, because it's such an amazing comic, and I think most people feel it was worth the journey. I think most people really enjoy themselves on it. But the ending is extremely fizzle out-ish. But you don't really want to warn someone that the ending is terrible, because some people might take that as spoilers. But you can see why I highly recommend this comic, but I always have to bite my lip about the ending because I don't want to kind of like ruin that experience, because maybe it's the greatest experience in the world for some.
Yeah.
For me, it just failed on the resolution side.
And I agree, but there were some good points in those later issues. Like, I really enjoyed Mason's sacrifice. He did all of the things that he knew Tony would have a hard time doing. Mason did all of that work and then made it the least difficult for Tony to finish out the journey. He committed suicide and was like, all right, eat me, so that Tony wouldn't have to eat the one person he loved most that John still took from us. Like, there were so many people that died at the end of this. I was a little shocked by that. But I also respect that. I like it when an author isn't scared to do what needs to be done to push his narrative forward. I mean, I'm still mad that he killed off a few of my favorites, but they went out in a good way. Like Kobe, he went out in a good way. I can't be mad, but I'm still a little sad.
Everything about this comic is great, except for that final really shot and resolution with the flash forward to the future. That's my only gripe about this comic. Maybe some other small annoyances, things that could be handled better. But overall, clearly my favorite comic of all time, American comic at least.
But it did one thing. It settled that age-old question of what came first, the chicken or the egg. And it is the egg. I loved that. I absolutely loved that. I got a good chuckle out of that.
So it's official, people. The reason you need to read this comic is to find out which came first, the chicken or the egg. We finally get our answer.
Yep.
It is completely reliable, 100% scientific. Come check out the answer. The egg came first. So overall, Chew, what are you going to rate this one, Lezlie?
Oh gosh, I have to give it a 5 overall because every volume I absolutely loved. I loved. I'll reread it, and I have to give it a 5. It did so many things well. It did have a great story. It did have a great villain. It had wonderful fleshed out characters. I love all of the nuances, the pop culture references. There were so many things about this comic that were themselves singularly entertaining, and just the way they put it all together with these two guys did all of this. I mean, I loved it. It's definitely my favorite American comic I've read to date.
And it's worth pointing out, I guess, to loyal followers of this channel that you do the 5 out of 5 rating. And while Crypto and I typically do out of 10, I would give this a 10 out of 10. I absolutely loved it. I'm willing to overlook blemishes or things that I didn't care about because of all the things that you stated as well. So still easily, even on my reread here, easily my favorite comic and easy to recommend, but I'm always nervous about the ending because I know for some people, the ending value is so great that it can override and bring them off of that high of a 10. And I get that. But for me, you know, the journey was worth it.
Oh, 100%. I've always been about the journey rather than the ending. And then I always remind myself, it's subjective to me personally. Someone else might read that ending and think it was fantastic.
Journey before destination, right?
Oh dear. I'm not getting into that with you.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us on the Chew blog, where we get to share our experiences as we go through it. If you'd like for more comic adventures from Lezlie and I, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and we'll announce what's coming up soon, where we're actually going to have a third and maybe fourth guest for our journey on the next comic. We look forward to seeing you guys soon. Una out.
See you guys.